Part 43. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 425. 419. Georgia is a small country located on the east coast of the Black Sea in Western Asia. Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. This is a city that has been under construction since the former Soviet Union. The urban population accounts for 1/5 of the entire Georgia. Even in the general economic decline of the former Soviet Union, this beautiful city still exudes vigor and vitality. A civilian SA-360 Dolphin helicopter landed slowly over Tbilisi International Airport, and the tower staff guided the aircraft to land on the dedicated apron for private business jets. The landing gear unfolded from the belly, the helicopter landed firmly on the tarmac, the hatch opened, and Beltway jumped down first. However, Chen Yuyan did not get off the plane. He picked up the satellite phone on the plane and connected to Looper's communication. "How is the situation now? We are now in Kazbek in northern Georgia, and we will enter Russia further north. The Caucasus Research Institute, the last base of Umbrella, is in the Caucasus Mountains in Russia, specifically the Alagir region near Beslan. Because we need to transport a lot of weapons and equipment, we can only go from Georgia. In fact, whether it is the military operations of H.C.F., or the operations of Ghost and Hank, they also rely on Georgia." Looper replied. Chen Yuyan nodded. In this era, the aftermath of the disintegration of the former Soviet Union has not completely dissipated. The economies of the former federations are in a mess, and the international situation is also very chaotic. So small countries like Georgia actually have a lot of loopholes to exploit. At least it is much more convenient for them to transport all kinds of weapons and equipment to the past. "Is the equipment all delivered?" he asked. "It's still on the way, and Kazbek is only suitable as our logistics base. Our equipment is sent to the north of Kazbek, in a remote village at the foot of Kazbek mountain. It's relatively closed there, and even if the villagers see those weapons also dare not have any dissent." Looper replied. "What about the ghosts?" "They chose another village as their forward base. After we are ready, we need to go there first." "Okay, I'll come over right away." "Don't act rashly, let Yi take a look at everything. Although she doesn't understand magic, she can detect the fluctuation of magic." "Magic? So what Bertha said is true?" "Of course it's true. Our opponent this time is a magician. To be more precise, a necromancer. It's a novel experience. It's dangerous at the same time, and we'll see more of it in the future. Well, anyway, we'll wait for you here, and we'll try to keep a low profile before that." Chen Yuyan hung up the phone and said to Lin Huo, "Go to Mount Kazbek, Beltway. Don't humming jump. Come up for me. Let the airport fill us up with gas." An airport worker came over and asked a question in the local Georgian, and the driver they brought quickly explained in Georgian, "They are coming from the United States for vacation and are going to Kazbek Mountain." "What did the staff say again?" The driver shook his head and said, "We won't go deep. The farthest we will go is Ushgulai." The staff member's face changed drastically. He waved his hands vigorously, and spoke much faster. "Barabara said a lot." The driver turned around and said to Chen Yuyan, "Boss Yan, he said that there are a lot of missing people in Ushgulai recently, and there are rumors of ghosts. Now even the postal staff are afraid to go." Chen Yuyan frowned. He picked up the map and looked at it, and said, "Then we won't go that far. Go to Spentsminda for a few days and come back after a few days, and tell him." The driver turned around and translated for him, and then took out a stack of dollars and stuffed them in. The staff's expression eased a little, and after a while of instructing, they picked up the communicator, called the tanker, and began to refuel the helicopter. After the fuel was filled, the pilot returned to the helicopter and closed the hatch, and turned to Chen Yuyan and said, "He also told us not to enter the Russian border. Recently, many people died on the border. The two countries are arguing in private. Boss Yan, are we really going? Chun Yuyan looked at the pilot in his 40s. He was a pilot hired by the Ruins World Group. I used to fly a Cobra helicopter when I was fighting in Afghanistan, and after retiring, I helped people spray pesticides on farms in Texas. Later, I heard that the Ruin World Group recruited experienced pilots, so I came to apply for the job. Here, he can get 5 times more salary than before, and his work enthusiasm is very high. Boss Yan and Boss Yan are always on call and willing to work hard. Seeing that there are more and more employees who can be used in this way, the shelf of Ruin World Group is slowly being built. Chun Yuyan sighed secretly, and smiled at the uncle. It's okay, you just stay in Kazbek. Keep an eye on our plane. He pointed to an AK-47 hanging behind the cockpit. It was full of silver bullets. After arriving in Kazbek, Chun Yuyan, Beltway, and Lin Huo found a jeep and left on their own, while the driver uncle was free to move around. There are actually quite a few people who travel to Kazbek every year, so the town is relatively open and doesn't particularly care about outsiders. But on the road, Chun Yuyan noticed something different in the eyes of the passers-by around him. Is that fear? The situation seems to be a bit wrong. The necromancer has a wide range of activities in this area, and it should have caused a relatively large impact. Chun Yuyan said. In my opinion, this is simply obvious. Since entering the Caucasus Mountains, the stench of necromancy has been permeating the air. The forest fire was also very serious. Beltway sniffled as he drove and asked, "Why don't I smell bad?" This is just a metaphor. Among several different schools of magic, the traces of necromancer magic are the most obvious, because what they play with is death and soul. Lin Huo said. Beltway whistled happily. So we're going to deal with a magician this time? Ha 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 ha. Then we can see the skeleton soldiers, ghosts, death knights and so on in the comics? You'd better pray that we don't see the death knight, because of the existence of that level. Even if AT-72 is placed in front of it, it will only take a few seconds for it to dismantle the tank. Lin Huo gave him a blank look. Have you seen it? Chun Yuyan asked curiously. According to the D&D rules, the minimum requirement for a Death Knight to transform is level 6, but in fact, all existences above level 10 are transformed. After the transformation is completed, most Death Knights are above level 15, which is already close to legendary it is. Lin Huo explained. Ha 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 ha. I knew it. It's fun to follow Boss Yan. Maybe one day I can ride a black dragon. Ha 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 ha. Beltway let go of the steering wheel with one hand and patted Chun Yuyan vigorously shoulders. I think you are more likely to carry anti-aircraft missiles to attack gangsters. Be careful of someone. Chun Yuyan yelled. Beltway, who was distracted, saw a figure shaking in front of the car, and he quickly turned the steering wheel. The jeep made a screeching sound of brakes, drew an arc and slammed into the stone pile on the side of the road with a bang, and then stopped. Only then did they realize that it was an old woman wandering in the middle of the road. She staggered on the road, and when she walked, her hands didn't move at all, and she was still chanting words. Hey, you stinky old woman. You're humming dead, aren't you? Beltway had a bad temper, and started cursing as soon as he walked up. If he hadn't considered that the other party was an old woman, he would have already started fighting. Wait a minute, don't go there. Lin Huo snarled to block Beltway. She has been corrupted by necromancy. If there is no accident, she won't wake up after falling asleep tonight. When she wakes up again, open your eyes and you will become a ghoul. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 426. 420 Land of Death. Ghoul. Could it be that the necromancer's magic has spread to this side? Chun Yuyan stepped forward and asked. It seems so. Beltway, go and see the condition of the car. I'll see if I can dispel the magic on her. Lin Huo stepped forward, stood 2 meters away from the old woman, and made a gesture, then with a light wave, dispel. A blue light flashed past, only to see bursts of black air visible to the naked eye on the old woman, and then she fell to the ground unconscious. The car is fine, it works. Beltway said over there. Okay. Lin Huo helped the old woman to the door of a house with people on the side of the road, knocked hard on the door, and then got into the car and left. On the way, Chen Yuyan turned his head and asked, why didn't the other party use the T-virus to create undead? Because using magic is more concealed, and I just experienced what happened in Raccoon City. The T-virus is very sensitive in this world. However, I guess the other party will not be satisfied with this slow speed. They should want to accumulate a lot of money through this method. Batch the undead army, and after gaining basic strength, use the T-virus to expand rapidly. Lin Huo said. It seems that Kazbek is not safe, Chen Yuyan said. Kazbek is considered a tourist town, and the exposure is quite high. That necromancer won't be so arrogant? Lin Huo was also a little uncertain. Anyway, be careful. Chen Yuyan took out the satellite phone and called the helicopter pilot who stayed in Kazbek, telling him to be careful at all times. Kazbek might be in danger. The jeep drove for more than 4 hours, and finally came to a village named Samuba in the evening, which is where Looper and the others based their foothold. The time is now around 8 o'clock, but there are no pedestrians on the street. Chen Yuyan and the others came to a house on the edge of the village and found Looper. After entering the door, they found that Looper and the others were already fully armed, with 4 eyes holding a test tube to analyze on the computer, and there was still a smell of blood in the room. What happened? Chen Yuyan walked in, but found a corpse lying on the table. It looked like a commoner. He was shot in the head, and the blood flowing on the table had coagulated. Someone tried to attack us just now and was killed. 4 Eyes is studying that person's blood sample. Looper replied. Blood sample? Could it be someone infected with T-virus? Chen Yuyan asked. It's not the T-virus, their color is different, it's black. Yi said from the side. This person died yesterday, he's gone. 4 Eyes replied. Is this the only thing you can find out? Chen Yuyan frowned. That's all, other than that, his body functions are normal. 4 Eyes said. Lin Huo stepped forward and waved his hand, dispel. The blue light flashed, black air emerged from the corpse, and the corpse immediately began to rot at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally became a corpse that seemed to have been exposed to the sun outside. The same highly decomposed corpse as Monday. This is a ghoul that hasn't been fully transformed. Lin Huo frowned and looked at the foul-smelling corpse. This room is useless, let's change it. Anyway, someone has already found it. Where's Bertha? Chen Yuyan asked. She was going to pick up the truck that delivered the weapons. It should have been connected by now. Looper said with a frown. Boom. Boom. Suddenly there was a burst of gunfire in the silent village. Something happened. Looper and Chen Yuyan looked at each other, and she immediately made a decision. Yi, you and Beltway stay in the room and move things out, let's go. Without any hesitation, Chen Yuyan instantly took out the T-60 power armor from his personal space and put it on the ground and handed it to Beltway, then grabbed Lin Huo, and rushed towards the direction of the gunfire together with Looper and Xian Go. At the other end of the village, a truck was being held up by a group of villagers. Bertha had already put on her combat uniform, but she had put on a windbreaker over it. She had a gloomy face, holding an ordinary M1911 pistol in her hand, and the plasma pistol that Chen Yuyan gave her was hanging on her waist. Looper made a gesture while running. Chen Yuyan understood immediately. He put down the forest fire, and the two pretended to be eager and ran towards the truck, while Looper and Xian were hidden in the darkness. What happened? I heard gunshots. Lin Huo walked over and asked in fluent Russian. Russian and Georgian are actually two completely different language families, but there are many people who speak Russian in Georgia, so many villagers understand the word forest fire. A villager in the periphery pushed the forest fire fiercely. "Get out of here, foreigners!" A Russian-speaking villager shouted from behind. Chen Yuyan immediately saw a very simple sharp-beaked skull drawn on the foreheads of these people, which seemed to be in the shape of a bird's beak. He frowned, feeling that these people seemed to have begun to form an organization. And opposite Bertha, an old man with a mask that looks a bit like a crow skull is confronting her. Lin Huo also squeezed over with a smile on his face and said, "Hey, we have something to talk about, and we have something to talk about. You see, we just came here for a tour today, and you're going to use knives and guns. How can we have fun, right? Foreigners. It's none of your business, get out." The masked old man saw that Chen Yuyan and Lin Huo both had oriental faces, but he didn't expect them to be the same as Bertha, and he just wanted to drive them away. Then he turned his head to Bertha and said in very broken English, "Heretic. Plotting evil. Get out." "I must go into the village," said Bertha darkly. "If you don't get out, you will die." The old man roared, only to see bursts of black air suddenly emanating from the surrounding villagers. "See what we look like. You are going to die too." Ah. Immediately afterwards, the skin of all the villagers turned purple, black blood vessels crawled all over their bodies, their eyes were bloodshot and scarlet, and even their nails grew a lot longer. "His kill!" the villagers roared. Boom! With a gunshot, the village head was shot in the forehead, and the whole person was sent flying. The battle broke out in an instant, and Bertha immediately raised the M1911 pistol and fired all the bullets in the magazine, but the bullets hit the villagers as if nothing happened, and they still roared and rushed forward. Ugh! The village chief stood up from the ground in an extremely unnatural posture. His crow skull mask was smashed by bullets, revealing the wrinkled face with bubbling on his forehead with black blood. But his face was extremely ferocious, those black blood vessels became thicker and thicker, and finally knotted together to form terrifying muscles. Roar! The village chief roared and rushed over, and a villager standing in front of him was sent flying more than 10 meters away with a slap. Terrible power! But what came oncoming was a green light cluster. Boom! The village chief was hit by the green light ball, and the kinetic energy attached to the scorching plasma ball knocked him down immediately, and before he even landed, the super high temperature had already plasmatized his body, separating bones and muscles, and within a few seconds, it turned into a ball of high temperature light green plasma, melting the surrounding ground. Bertha put away the plasma pistol, turned over and jumped onto the truck. Chen Yuyan and Lin Huo had already picked up their weapons and fired a burst of fire to force the villagers back, and then they also jumped on the truck. "Thank you for the 10,000 starting coins rewarded by Shiliang. Thank you for the 1,000 starting coins rewarded by book friend 201908201038555951. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 427. 421 First Encounter with the Undead. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Chen Yuyan and Lin Huo shot one after another, knocking down the villagers in front of them. The truck driver slammed on the accelerator, and the truck made a strange noise and rushed into the village. Chen Yuyan was not polite at all, and took out an AK-47 full of silver bullets and swiped at the crowd. However, those villagers were also very agile in their actions, and quickly dispersed. Chen Yuyan was not very good at aiming when the truck was shaking violently. The shuttle only knocked down 2 villagers, and it seemed that the silver bullets didn't have any special effect on them, except that they were a little expensive. However, it might hurt to switch to other people, but Chen Yuyan didn't care at all, even if it was a golden bullet. Because of the transformation of tiberium ore, for him, precious metals or rare metals are no different from iron lumps. Don't kill too many people. A country like Georgia is completely unreasonable. Do you want to be a wanted criminal? Seeing the rise of Chen Yuyan's murder, Lin Huo quickly pulled him down. Then what should we do? Notify the Georgian government. Tell them there is a virus outbreak near Mount Kazbek. Only with the witness of the government army can we kill. Chen Yuyan thought for a while, and said to Bertha, go and pick up Xian and Looper first, and then we will buy some time for Beltway and Yi to move things. Then he took out the satellite phone and connected the communication with Tomoko Gaoliang. You immediately find a way to notify the Georgian government, and warn them in the name of our Ruin World Group. Tell them that Umbrella Company was discovered in the Caucasus Mountains. The remnants of the Umbrella Corporation are conducting virus experiments, and then we will find a way to allow us to intervene in the name of the group. As long as we can guarantee to hand over the Umbrella Company's things we got to them, Georgia will not refuse our help. Tomoko Gaoliang thought for a while and said, it shouldn't be a big problem. Now I am active in France. Georgia has been actively moving closer to NATO. They don't want this to affect their diplomacy. Then I'll leave it to you. Chen Yuyan hung up the call, and connected to Justin Ayer's call without hesitation. Ayer, don't say anything, go back to the world of radiation immediately and bring all the synthets that can be used to me and stand by. How to go back? You think about it in your mind, and then I agree with you to go back. With two bang-bangs, Xian and Looper jumped from the second floor of the private house on the side of the road to the cargo compartment behind the car very quickly. Don't kill anyone. Looper and Four Eyes nodded, and after standing still, they leaned out and started shooting at the feet of the villagers. Chen Yuyan called Carly Lloyd again non-stop, asking her to prepare a large transport plane as soon as possible and complete the relevant procedures. This plane needs to fly directly to Georgia. At this moment, the truck suddenly made a sharp turn, and Chen Yuyan was caught off guard with a bang and his head hit the glass. He turned around and yelled at the driver, drive carefully. Boss Yan, look, over there, the truck driver pointed forward with trembling fingers. Looking in that direction, Chen Yuyan's expression changed drastically. I only saw an Orthodox church over there, and in the cemetery behind the church, a large number of corpses and skeletons were crawling out of the dirt. That necromancer must have been preparing for a long time. If we hadn't come over suddenly, the necromancers here should wait until the time is right before breaking out suddenly. At that time, perhaps with the Umbrella Caucasus Research Institute as the center, a large area around mountains will become a kingdom of death. Lin Huo said while throwing away the gun, and he chanted a spell and made a gesture with his hand. Burst fireball. Boom. A ball of fire the size of a wash basin flew straight over and exploded at the entrance of the cemetery. The power of this explosion was at least equivalent to 2 or 3 grenades. A large number of living corpses and skeletons were blown to pieces by the fireball, and the dilapidated arches of the cemetery were also blown down. Chen Yuyan's face was gloomy. Moreover, the terrain of the Caucasus Mountains is complex, which is not conducive to air strikes and the deployment of the armored corps. Even nuclear bombing may not be able to kill those undead. It's useless. Russia would never dare to use a nuclear bomb in the Caucasus Mountains. Looper said later, once the nuclear bomb explodes on the Caucasus Mountains, the nuclear radiation dust will spread throughout Europe and Central and West Asia. A devastating result. This is going to be troublesome. Chen Yuyan's face was extremely ugly. Trouble is yet to come. Northern Georgia has never been peaceful. They want to join NATO, but Russia will never sit idly by, so the two sides have been wrestling secretly. Do you know the South Austrian X-ladder? The independent forces in Georgia are the two sides, the core of the wrestling. Then I unfortunately tell you that the Caucasus Research Institute is not far from the South Austrian X-ladder. Looper said. Then we should contact Russia now. Chen Yuyan frowned. If you want a local war to break out, then get in touch. Russia is worrying that there is no reason to intervene in the situation in Georgia. Rupiah replied. Chen Yuyan poked his head out from the lathe and saw that the truck had already thrown off the group of undead creatures and the villagers who had been transformed into ghouls, so he patted the driver and asked him to drive back to the village to pick up Bert Weehayi. As soon as I approached there, I heard a burst of rapid shooting, and the gradually darkening environment was illuminated by streaks of red light. The truck drove past, only to see Beltway driving a T-60 power armor, holding Elder Maxon's final judgment and firing wildly at the surrounding undead creatures. Countless red laser beams are launched to bring devastating power. Compared with ordinary laser Gatling, the final judgment has improved the cooling system and energy conversion system, which brings super fast firing rate. There are more than a dozen laser beams fired almost every second, forming a deadly light net in front of him. All undead creatures that approach will be ignited as long as they are touched by the scorching laser rays, and then burned into pillars of fire one by one. Ya ha 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 ha. Beltway laughed wildly and happily. And behind him, Yi, carrying a heavy ammunition box in one hand and an infantry radar in the other, walked out effortlessly and put the things on the side of the road. She looked back at Beltway with a look of disdain. She was not even interested in killing these lowly undead creatures. The truck driver was an old hand, and he was also a rough-headed man. Facing such a magical scene, he didn't panic at all. He rushed over and stopped firmly in front of Yi. The members of the Wolf Pack team got out of the car immediately, and hurriedly loaded all kinds of equipment onto the back of the truck. They are very well prepared, including a large amount of ammunition, food, drinking water, infantry radar, medicine, etc., and are already ready for long-term combat. Beltway also ran over, unfolded the power armor and got down from inside. Chen Yuyan immediately put the power armor into his personal space. The rest of Wolfpack took his place, and a hail of bullets kept the undead out. All I saw was a fully transformed ghoul rushing up at an extremely fast speed. The flesh on its body had rotted a lot, and its claws had become very long. Both its speed and strength were far beyond ordinary people. The silver bullets fired by the AK-47 used by everyone hit it, and it basically just made him pause. Hiss! The ghoul roared and leaped forward with a diving leap. With its immortal body, it actually pierced through the bullet rain of the Wolf Pack team, and grabbed it with 4 eyes. The ferocious and terrifying face of the ghoul was reflected in the indifferent eyes of the 4 eyes, and then turned slightly. The ghoul flew into the air, and kicked out the slender legs just right, kicking the ghoul with a bang staggering. The AK-47 in his hand smashed it into a sieve. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 428. 422 Misfortunes never come singly. On a hill far away from the village, Chen Yuyan and the others set up several marching tents, built a bonfire, took out some canned food, boiled them up and began to eat. The effect of silver bullets doesn't seem to be very good, Chen Yuyan said as he pulled the firewood. It can't be said that there is no effect. I can see that every time a bullet hits, part of the undead magic on the undead creature will be purified. So you can see that it is difficult for those undead creatures to have a second chance to stand up. That's it. Normally speaking, unless the fire of soul in the undead creature can be extinguished, it is impossible to kill the undead creature. Lin Huo said. That is to say, it is so difficult to have an effect. Wouldn't it be even more terrifying if there is no effect? Looper said. This place should be relatively far away from the necromancer's casting range. Otherwise, under the influence of necromancer magic, some destroyed undead creatures can still reorganize themselves. Ordinary bullets can't kill them at all. Otherwise, how could the undead be killed? What about the 3 major locusts in the universe? Lin Huo said. 3 big locusts. What are the other 2? Looper asked a little interested. Robots and Zerg. Lin Huo replied. I think I kind of get what it means, that is, all these things are real? Rupier asked. As for robots, Boss Yan has a lot of them. But they haven't formed a scale yet. As for the Zerg, it's best to pray that they won't be encountered. Lin Huo sighed. Don't care about locusts or not, let's just kill that necromancer and kill it right now. Beltway killed a large piece of luncheon meat with one mouthful today. I stuffed it into my mouth, chewed until my mouth was full of oil, and then opened a can of beer and gulped it down. Looper shook his head and said, if it's that simple without the undead, the ghosts and Hank will not lose contact. Moreover, the number of mercenary troops sent by H.C.F to attack the Caucasus research base must be more than ours, and the firepower density is also certain. They are far more than us, so they will be wiped out with a high probability. So if we are not careful, let alone rescue the ghosts, even our own lives will be in danger. Therefore, we still listen to the experts. Your opinion, the Mr. Magician. Lin Huo nodded and said, now we need to know which system the necromancer belongs to, and we must know that necromancers of different systems are good at different things. From the current point of view, he is using some mental magic curses come to establish an evil sect for himself, in order to expand his power among ordinary people. In other words, what we see may only be his peripheral power. Looper patted his forehead, somewhat annoyed. We made a major mistake at the time. We never thought that the other party would be able to accumulate strength slowly at the door of his own house without going out. It's ridiculous that our eyes have been staring at Umbrella and other upstart biomedical companies. It's not your fault. The necromancer's power expansion method is indeed completely different from other people's. But, Chen Yuyan comforted him, and he turned to Lin Huo and asked, but no matter what, if there are no high-level necromancers before the undead, it is impossible for the undead army to compete with the modern army. What is the necromancer planning? What I can imagine is that he intends to use the power of undead magic to influence the Naneo X ladder, and then establish a kingdom of the undead of his own. But to do this, he needs not only the undead army, but also a lot of funds and talents. Maybe, that's why he colluded with Oswell E. Spencer? Lin Huo thought. Chen Yuyan was startled. No. Because of our intervention here, I have handed over a large amount of evidence of Umbrella Corporation in the Raccoon City incident to the United States. Their collapse is much faster than expected. It is estimated that now Umbrella's property has been frozen. Now even Spencer himself is just a pauper. Then it is to resell the T-virus in the black market to make money? No. It should be a worse situation, Alfred Ashford. After Chen Yuyan finished speaking, he quickly picked up the satellite phone, and immediately after connecting, he yelled, Alexia. Your brother is now. What's the situation? Alexia's indifferent voice came from the phone. It's a bad situation. He has been transferring assets for the past few days, and now the Ashford family has transferred a large amount of assets to a mysterious account, many of which have already been transferred. Realize. Could it be that you, a genius girl, didn't notice it at all? Chen Yuyan roared angrily. After all, I just woke up from a deep sleep, and Alfred has been taking care of family affairs. Alexia replied. Then how much assets did he transfer? 2 billion. Oh, 2 billion Vietnamese dong, it's okay, it's not too bad. Are you underestimating my family? It's dollars. Chen Yuyan spat out a mouthful of old blood. Oh no, spit in front of his face, $2 billion. Are you humming kidding me? As I said, the background of the Ashford family is not comparable to that of ordinary consortiums. Then you are so rich, why did your father give birth to you in such a hurry? Chen Yuyan was furious. Many of these are fixed assets, some options, and stocks. In addition, if you can't find a suitable profit point, no matter how much money you have, you will just sit and eat. Chen Yuyan only felt the black lines all over his head. I think your mountain looks a bit big. Well, then what are you doing to your brother now? I have locked up Alfred, but it will take me some time to get back the family business. But I can give you a direction. A large part of this batch of funds has flowed into Ukraine. Click. Chen Yuyan hung up the phone, looked at Looper and said calmly, the curse that the necromancer put on Alfred before has taken effect, and Alfred transferred $2 billion of assets to a mysterious person. And a lot of that money went into Ukraine. There is only one possibility to go to Ukraine, and that is to buy weapons. Ukraine has received a huge amount of former Soviet armed forces, and their own financial crisis is unable to absorb these weapons. They sell these weapons in private from the Prime Minister to the non-commissioned officers. And the price is very cheap. $2 billion, enough to arm 500,000 people. Looper said in a deep voice. Chen Yuyan clutched his forehead speechlessly. You must know that this world is now a long time ago, and the inflation at this time is not particularly serious. This $2 billion is really genuine. We must act immediately. Chen Yuyan took a deep breath and said, Looper, you are the tactical commander, what do you think we should do? We have to divide our forces into two groups. One side stays here to prepare for the Georgian government forces, and the other side immediately sets off for Ushgulai, which was the previous base of operations for Ghost and Hank. We need to see if they are staying. What message? Said Rupier. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 429. 423 Start Action. Then let's take action. Chen Yuyan said. But the problem is the allocation of manpower. Looper frowned. Now we have only one person who understands magic better here, Lin Huo. Those who go to Ushgulai need him to prevent the ghosts from repeating their mistakes. And those who stay here also need such people to cooperate with the actions of the Georgian government forces. Chen Yuyan thought for a while and said, well, Yi is still a little sensitive to magic. The power armor that Beltway is using now should not appear in front of the government army for the time being. Yi and I will bring Four Eyes and Bell together. Tui went to Ushgulai. Yu, Linhuo, and Bertha stayed behind and waited to meet the Georgian government forces. Yu and Linhuo should be able to deal with the people there, and Tomoko Gaoliang will also help from a distance. This is the only way to go at the moment, but if you do this, you will face even greater risks when you go to Ushgu. Looper said. With Yi and I here, we can solve any problems, at least we can get out of the body. Chen Yuyan said, Linhuo, in this situation, what other magic is more useful? You teach Yi. Linhuo thought for a while and said, then I will teach you three magics. The first is to detect undead, the second is to resist the undead, and the third is to dispel undead. Detecting undead can let you see the surroundings. Undead within a range of 500 meters, and the anti-undead barrier can generate an area with a radius of 10 meters on the ground, and undead creatures who step into this area will continue to be hurt. As for dispelling undead, it directly causes damage to an undead, and the damage works by overriding the soul of the undead, so it's pretty deadly against the undead. Yi nodded and said nothing. Linhuo demonstrated these magic spells directly in front of her, only to see countless complicated lines appeared in Yi's eyes, which can only be seen clearly unless magnified countless times, as if they were lines of countless circuits, and then she raised her hand to make a gesture, detect undead. A light yellow light emitted from her hands and entered her eyes. At this moment her eyes seemed to be covered with a light yellow halo. Then Yi made another gesture and read softly, dispel the undead. Swish. A pale yellow light flashed in front of him for an instant, and then disappeared in an instant, as if it had never existed. Yi didn't stop, she made another gesture, anti-necromancer. This time, however, there was no response. Yi thought for a while, then turned to Lin Huo and said, I didn't learn it, let's do it again. Lin Huo nodded. Anti-undead enchantment is a third-level magic, detecting undead is a first-level magic, and dispelling undead is a second-level magic. So, your unnatural learning ability is still linked to the complexity of the object. It's a pity I don't know level 4 spells yet, otherwise, if I can use level 4 Light of Heaven, these undead creatures won't be a problem at all. The more advanced the magic, the more complicated it is, and the slower it is to learn. This is a normal thing. Chen Yuyan said. Yes, but you think it's normal to learn a first-level magic and a second-level magic in less than a second. Lin Huo sighed and cast the anti-dead barrier again. This time, Yi learned it directly. Seeing the excited girl, Lin Huo sighed and said, I feel like I have lost the meaning of existence. Chen Yuyan patted him on the shoulder, there is only one Yi, and she can only learn passively, but cannot create and surpass. Okay, Lin Huo felt better now. A group of people parted ways and divided their things. Beltway put on the T-60 power armor, which freed up Chen Yuyan's personal space, and he packed a lot of weapons, ammunition, food, and water into it. Then some tools were found, and the infantry radar antenna was installed on the back of Beltway's power armor, so that it could be used at any time. They left in the jeep, leaving the truck with Rupier and the others. There is no direct road from here to Ushgulai. If you go normally, you need to turn back to Tbilisi and then take the Mscha, but obviously Chen Yuyan and the others don't have the time. They stepped on the accelerator of the jeep to the end and drove on the mountain. The big rocks along the way made the jeep bump harder than a roller coaster. Finally, after more than 2 hours of driving, there was a bang, and a black puff appeared from the hood. Smoke, the engine is completely slumped. Looking at the satellite positioning with 4 eyes, he said, if you walk for the rest of the journey, it will take 2 hours. Let's go. Chen Yuyan walked over, took off the 4-eyed backpack and carried it on his body, and walked forward first. The eyes of the 4 eyes flickered for a while, but they didn't speak, but also stepped to keep up. Ushgulai is a very remote village with only 2,300 people in the whole village. However, it is precisely because of the pure natural scenery that is completely undisturbed that it has also attracted the attention of many donkey friends. Chen Yuyan stood on the nearby hillside, picked up the binoculars and looked at the village shrouded in darkness from a distance. Many brick and tile buildings in this village are very old, and many watchtowers are said to be relics from the 8th century in the park. These watchtowers have also become one of the symbols of Ushgulai. In the village, there is a lot of black. Yi frowned and was about to use magic. Don't use it for the time being. It's still a bit far from the village. Let's use the infantry radar first. Chen Yuyan patted Yi's hand, and then turned on the terminal of the infantry radar. What they brought was the SR Hotm individual reconnaissance radar, which was the US military equipment that Looper got in the underground black market before. It can detect infantry units up to 10 kilometers away, but if you want to accurately locate, the distance cannot 1 kilometer. Even so, it can be said to be an artifact of individual combat. Beltway immediately knelt down on one knee, holding a rock with one hand to maintain his stability, and then the radar was turned on. On the terminal in front of Chen Yuyan, at least 4,500 red dots were densely displayed in Ushgulai in front of him. According to the data, there are only more than 200 people in Ushgulai. Most of the extra people are undead crawling out of the cemetery. Chen Yuyan frowned. If we set up a good position in advance, it won't take much trouble to kill all these undead spirits. 4 Eyes said coldly. No, our goal is not Ushgulai, but the Caucasus Research Institute and that necromancer. Don't startle the enemy. Chen Yuyan handed the individual radar terminal to Beltway and said, you stay here to meet them. At the same time, help us monitor the enemy's situation. If we are exposed, you will come in directly. Yeah. Beltway was a little unhappy when he heard that there was nothing wrong with him, but he still agreed. Let's go. Cian took out the gas mask and put it on, and checked the equipment in his hand. Like Bertha, she prefers one-handed weapons, because the other hand needs to use an injection gun at any time. Chenyuan also prepared a plasma pistol for her. Behind her, she also carried an AK-47 with silver bullets. Chenyuan brought Yi and Four Eyes, and the three of them took advantage of the night to approach the village silently like three ghost shadows. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 430. 424 Ushgilai. In the village of Ushgilai, the villagers were walking aimlessly among the houses. Their walking postures were very strange. Their upper body was almost completely motionless, only their feet were moving mechanically. And on the foreheads of these villagers, there is a mark of a sharp-billed skull tattooed on them. These people have been transformed by necromancy, be careful not to touch them. Chenyuan said in a low voice. There are two villagers approaching you in the corner on the left. There is a watchtower in front of you, you can go in and take shelter. And the vision there should be good. Beltway's voice came. Chenyuan looked forward, and there was an ancient watchtower standing there, with a height of 7 or 8 meters. He turned his head to look at Four Eyes and Yi, nodded, quickly flashed over, and then entered the watchtower. As soon as their figures disappeared, two villagers staggered over. In front of the observation window on the tower, Chenyuan stayed away from the window, picked up the binoculars and adjusted his angle to observe the situation of the village. What I want to say here is, don't watch movies and TV shows where a sniper sticks his gun out of the window and it seems cool, but in fact that is a stupid way. Sticking out the muzzle, is this because you are afraid that others will not know that there are snipers here? In the same way, if you lie on the window and hold a telescope, the reflection of the lens alone will expose you. So the correct way is to stay away from windows, and only need to maintain the minimum field of vision required for sniping and observation, so as to ensure your concealment to the greatest extent. Fortunately, several windows were opened in these watchtowers, and the view was very good. Chenyuan saw a group of villagers gathered in front of the old church in the middle of the village. And those zombies and skeletons that climbed up from the cemetery also stood there quietly. Most of these zombies and skeletons held wooden shields and kitchen knives in their hands, which should have been given to them by the villagers. No good. It looks like those villagers are performing some ceremony in the church. Chenyuan handed the binoculars to Cian. Looking around, he also frowned. What are they doing? Sprinkling blood on the idol in the church? Wait a minute, they nailed a woman to the statue, she's not dead yet. Chenyuan took the binoculars and saw that the villagers were nailing a bloody woman to the statue. That woman seemed to be a donkey friend who came here to play, but now she just lowered her head, and she didn't even feel the severe pain. If it wasn't for the slightly rising and falling chest, she would have thought it was a corpse. I think, they are blaspheming. Chenyuan patted Yi and said, Yi, no matter what they want to do, they don't want that woman to die for the time being. Cian and I will leave first, and when we arrive ghosts go to their house, you stay here, and when their ceremony is halfway through, kill that woman directly. Okay Dad. Yi nodded without hesitation. Chenyuan and Cian jumped down very quickly, and then under Beltway's guidance, they bypassed the villagers and came to a private house on the edge of the village. There was no one in the house, and the door had been damaged, with black blood stains on it. Chenyuan frowned, and carefully slipped in through the hole without touching the broken door panel. All I saw was a mess inside the house, and there were still bullet casings from the MP-5 submachine gun on the ground, as well as many fragments. Some were broken cans, some drinking water bottles, and even a smashed radio station. They were attacked suddenly, and there is a high probability that they are civilians. Chen Yuyan observed the surrounding environment. With the vigilance of the ghosts, if they are armed personnel, there is absolutely no chance to get close to this house. The four eyes were looking at the black blood stains and bullet holes on the wall. They hit the enemy at least 50 shots, and they shot at close range, all of which were penetrating wounds. Then leave from here and here. Chen Yuyan came to the back of the house, where a window was damaged, and the window frame was facing outwards. No doubt it was knocked out from the inside out, and a hole was knocked out in a wall. You can tell Hank did it? This comprehensive Commando King's own strength is also very good, not far behind Beltway. On the windows and the broken wall bricks, a few codes were roughly carved with a dagger. This is the code of the Wolf Pack team. The content description is that they all survived and have moved north. Chen Yuyan raised his eyes and looked far to the north. In that direction, the majestic Caucasus Mountains couldn't see the top at all. At this time, Yi's voice came from the earphone, "Dad, they took off that woman's clothes and tried to dig out her heart. Shoot and break her heart." Chen Yuyan gave the order very coldly, even if it was just an innocent traveler. Almost at the same time as his words fell, there was a bang. Under Yi's precise shooting, a large bloody flower exploded on that woman's chest. The bullet rolled in the chest cavity, instantly turning her heart into a pile of meat paste. This shot also seemed to turn on the switch, and the surrounding skeletons and zombies raised their heads one after another, and the pale soul fire burned in the empty eye sockets. And the villagers roared wildly, black air spread over them, their bodies changed visibly with the naked eye, their skin became livid, and immediately became very long, and their eyes began to shine with pale light. Then they took out all kinds of weapons from their bodies, roared loudly and rushed towards the place where the gunshots sounded. "The villagers are gathering," said Beltway. "And they are all equipped with modern weapons." Yi also said. "Well, it looks right. Undead have a certain IQ and can use weapons. It seems that the necromancer on the other side is planning to build a modern army of undead." Chen Yuyan asked Lin Huo before and learned about the undead. Undead can indeed use weapons. And the more advanced the undead, the higher the IQ. Basically, the IQ of black warriors and vampires is almost the same as that of humans. "Beltway, get ready, we will approach you first, and then we will go north into the Caucasus Mountains," Chen Yuyan said. "Ha ha ha ha. It's finally my turn to play," Beltway shouted excitedly. "Da-da-da. Da-da-da." Chen Yuyan had already rushed out with an AK-47 to shoot, knocking down several of the undead villagers running around. Immediately afterwards, countless bullets hit the place where he was standing just now, but he had already left. Yi was walking between the buildings at high speed, holding the alloy longsword brought back from the world of radiation in his hand. With a flash of sword light, several skeletons were split into two. Then she raised her hand and waved, "Dispel the undead." Swish. A light yellow light flashed, and several villagers were illuminated by the light, and the black air on their bodies immediately burst out, and then melted in the light. In just a few seconds, they fell to the ground and did not move. The four eyes are not polite. She shoots one after another with the plasma pistol. After killing a few skeletons, she picks up the injection gun and puffs a few times, and the syringe filled with concentrated T-virus and NE-alpha parasites hit several villagers. Those villagers screamed in pain. The power of NE-alpha parasites and undead spells began to compete for control of the body, and they immediately hit everyone as if they were going berserk. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 431. 425, Slaughtering the Undead. When those villagers went crazy, Four Eyes immediately shot several syringes containing T-virus at them. Under the action of a large dose of T-virus, the undead spells on the villagers were finally overwhelmed, and their bodies began to mutate violently while howling. Disgusting object of man half monster. These monsters immediately ran towards the surrounding villagers and undead creatures, waving their tentacles and sharp claws and knocking them down one by one. However, those undead creatures who were knocked down quickly stood up again. Although some villagers began to mutate due to the injection of the T-virus, they continued to move forward as if nothing happened. Seeing this scene, Chunyuan threw several grenades over there, and the bang bang blocked the undead creature's progress. Then he and Xian quickly left. It seems that only the NE alpha parasite can affect the control of those undead creatures, and the T-virus is completely useless. Four Eyes said. Indeed. Even if they are mutated by the T-virus, those villagers will still only become zombies, and zombies will be controlled by undead magic. Well, don't think about doing experiments, leave here and join Beltway. Chunyuan picked up the AK-47 and fired again, smashing several skeletons blocking the way in front of him to pieces, and then quickly left here with Four Eyes before the fragments of those skeletons began to reassemble. And Yi's performance was even more astonishing. She ran quickly in the village, and neither darkness nor obstacles could stop her. The villagers who had turned into ghouls picked up large and small weapons in their hands and shot at her indiscriminately, but these bullets that might not hit her head could not hit her at all. She circled around several houses, and the zombies, skeletons, and ghouls were unconsciously gathered together, and then she rolled forward suddenly. Her graceful posture seemed to be dancing. While still in mid-air, the gesture required for magic was completed on the hand, anti-death barrier. Swish. Immediately, a large magic circle with a diameter of about 10 meters appeared on the ground in front of it. Mysterious and incomprehensible symbols and characters slowly rotated in it, and the whole magic circle exuded a pale yellow, holy light. The undead creatures shrouded in it let out screams one after another, and a large amount of black energy began to emerge from their bodies, and then dissipated in the magic circle. And undead creatures like skeletons were directly melted by the magic circle. With just this magic, Yi killed more than 40 undead spirits. Taking advantage of the gap created by the magic this time, Yi quickly ran towards Chunyuan, and the undead spirits she passed were not her all-in-one enemies at all. She was like a humanoid harvester, invincible, unstoppable. Due to the sudden incident and the destruction of their blasphemous ritual, these undead spirits fell into chaos at first, and they just swarmed up to arrest Chunyuan and the others, but the three of them were so skilled that they couldn't catch them at all. The three of them ran towards the hillside where they came with a large group of undead. When they were close to the predetermined location, Chunyuan lowered his head, and through the electronic eyepiece on the gas mask, there were already more than 10 marks on the ground. These are the mines set by Beltway, which are sent to the electronic eyepiece through special signals, and only their specific frequencies can be seen. Bypassing these mines, Beltway wearing T-60 power armor stood up from behind a rock like a giant. The individual radar antenna installed on his back looked like a flag, and sporadic bullets hit the power. There is no effect on the armor other than rattling. With a smirk, he picked up the special laser Gatling in his hand, the final judgment, and began to warm up. The undead creatures behind didn't think about whether there was a trap at all. They only had one thought, which was to tear up all the living beings. Boom! 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 A burst of violent explosions suddenly rose from the ground, and the power of the landmine that Beltway had added was like high explosives, or he had already added high explosives to it. There are even a few incendiary mines among them. The hillside ahead was suddenly engulfed in flames, and the shockwave of the explosion sent the undead creatures flying one by one. And at this moment, Beltway pulled the trigger. SHHHHHHHH. The 5 sets of laser emission modules of the final judgment laser Gatling began to rotate crazily. Every time they rotated to the position of the trigger, they would be fired instantly. The terrible energy contained in the large-capacity nuclear fusion battery was extracted by the trigger, and through the compression of the emission module, formed the devastating red laser, then, fires it out. Countless red lasers completely covered the area more than 100 meters in front of Beltway, almost without any pause. In this laser storm, those undead creatures were ignited, caught fire, and then burned to ashes. No undead creature can come within 100 meters of the condescending Beltway. Ha 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 ha. Boss Yan. It's so cool. Ha 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 ha. This gun really has the firepower of the last company. Ha 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 ha. Beltway laughed loudly. Ah, I just said that casually before, but I didn't expect it to be true. Chenuyan was also a little surprised. In the world of Fallout 4, he had never seen Elder Maxon use this gun. Only Elder Maxon used it when Ramirez raided the large nuclear fusion plant, but at that time, after all, the volunteer army was a sneak attack, and Elder Maxon was also severely radiated inside, so he basically didn't use it much. Now he understands how terrifying this gun is. With that terrifying rate of fire and the powerful power of the laser gun, it is true that no grass grows anywhere it passes. And like Beltway's strafing, if it is an ordinary real single Gatling machine gun, even if it is carrying a large ammunition box, it will not be able to support the shooting for too long. But for laser Gatling, it's just a nuclear fusion battery thing. This explosion of landmines and the strafing of the final judgment killed at least 200 undead creatures. The remaining ones were either lucky enough to be blown away by the explosion, or they still didn't run up the hillside. Don't waste time, let's go. Chenuyan said. Have you found the ghost? Asked Beltway. Chenuyan pointed to the front and said, in the direction to the north of the village, the ghosts were suddenly attacked by the villagers who turned into ghouls, and they entered the Caucasus Mountains from that direction. So we're going to climb the mountain? Ha ha ha. Let's go. Beltway was in the right mood. He turned his head and threw a few more grenades down the hillside, and then walked away amidst the explosion. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 432. 426 Contact the military. Kazbek, a small town in northern Georgia. Military trucks were coming towards the town, full of heavily armed Georgian soldiers. This army did not enter the town, but stopped directly outside the town. The soldiers immediately jumped out of the car in an orderly manner, removed the barricades and barbed wire on the truck, and began to set up a blockade. There are also some soldiers who set up military tents in the back, and it seems that they intend to stay there for a long time. At this time, 100 or 200 soldiers took out gas masks and put them on, and then stood at the forefront, guarding in front of the blockade, while the soldiers without gas masks set up camp behind. The reason is simple. The military searched for a long time before finding 200 usable gas masks, and they were all left by the former Soviet Union's chemical defense forces. For a long time, Georgia has no problem with being poor and white. They have about 30,000 standing troops, including the Navy. The military expenditure for this fiscal year is only $15 million, which also includes the Navy's expenditure. One can imagine how many can be used on these infantry units. In fact, for such a small country, companies like Umbrella are not at the same level at all. It's just that Georgia's only advantage over the restricted Umbrella Corporation is that they are an independent political entity. Under such circumstances, compared with the $2 billion transferred from their family by Alfred Ashford, it can be understood that the two sides are not a contest of magnitude at all. The truck drove towards the barracks. Both Lin Huo and Looper had solemn expressions, and they could easily judge the current situation. Moreover, Lin Huo has seen it more thoroughly. He is aware of the changes in Georgia's domestic situation. In the year of zero Pakistan, the South Austrian Tier declared its independence, Georgia immediately chose to go to war, and Russia sent troops to support the South Austrian Tier, and defeated the Georgian army within 3 days. Since then, northern Georgia has been plunged into war. So now, it is not an exaggeration to say that this place is a powder keg. Lin Huo knew, and the experimenter on the other side, Wohlman Schindler, must also know. He chose this place, backed by the Caucasus Research Institute of Umbrella Corporation, relying on his own undead spells and T-virus, coupled with a large amount of funds transferred from the Ashford family. He can indeed establish himself in a short period of time. Power. As long as he expands his power and has the capital to negotiate, he will collude with the South Austrian Tier regime and plot independence. At that time, the whole of Russia will become their backing. After completing this step, the ruined world group that Chen Yuyan has worked so hard to build is nothing but scum in front of a giant like Russia. As the truck approached, several soldiers in front who saw the truck also approached with guns, and they raised their hands to signal the truck to stop. The driver stopped, Bertha remained in the car, and Rupier and Woodfire jumped out, hands up. We are the ones who notified the virus leak here. Where is your commander? Take us to see him. Lin Huo said loudly in Russian. Upon hearing his words, several soldiers stepped back subconsciously, pointed their guns at them, and then greeted them back, and then 3 soldiers wearing gas masks came over and asked, "What do you say? Has the virus spread here? Time is running out? Take me to see your commander." Lin Huo said. Several soldiers looked at each other and nodded. They brought another can of disinfectant and sprayed them all over with forest fire. It was obvious that Rupert was very angry, but she held back. Under the leadership of the soldiers, they came to the outside of a tent. The Georgian military commander did not let them in, but asked loudly through the tent, "I am the commander of the 4th Infantry Battalion of the Georgian Army. Your identities and clarify what you know." Lin Huo sighed and said, "You don't have to do this, the situation is really urgent now. But before that, I need to say that neither the T-virus nor this new type of virus can survive in the air, so let's go in. In addition, who is the most senior official you can contact, call him immediately, and I will explain the situation together. I suspect that this outbreak of the virus may affect the situation of the South Austrian X-ladder." There was a moment of silence in the tent, and then the battalion commander whispered some instructions to the deputy battalion commander. It should be that if something happens to him, he must stabilize the army as soon as possible. Then he said, "Come in." Lin Huo wiped the disinfectant on his face, wiped it on his clothes, and opened the curtain to go in. I only saw a burly but bald man with a beard sitting in front of the desk. He had a fierce face and said sharply, "You guys better explain the matter clearly. The problem with the Naneo X ladder is nothing anyone can say it. If you are lying, I can shoot you straight away for that alone. Call." Lin Huo said lightly. Arabai stared at the two for a long time, nodded slowly, then dialed the satellite phone next to him, said a few words, put the microphone on the table and said, "The Minister of Defense of Georgia is listening now." Lin Huo nodded, and said straightforwardly, "Let me introduce, my name is Lin Huo, from Yan country, and her name is Rupert, French. We both served in Umbrella's mercenary group, UBCS. After the Raccoon City incident broke out, we left Umbrella Corporation and joined a company called Ruin World Group, dedicated to saving the world from the threat of biochemical viruses." Umbrella Corporation, a deep voice came from the other end of the phone. "Under the current situation, all the people who have a relationship with them will have no good things. Moreover, this multinational group has come to our small and remote country. Do what? The Umbrella Company has basically been torn apart. The company's property has been transferred or seized, and employees have fallen and scattered. However, they still have a last and largest secret base, and this base is located in the Caucasus Mountains, located in Russia, but it is also very close to Georgia." Lin Huo said. "Then you should go to Russia for this matter, not us," said the Minister of Defense. "Listen to me first." Lin Huo waved his hands and continued, "Our original purpose was to investigate this Caucasus experimental base, but later we found that someone had already taken the lead, that is, the US Federal Biochemical Counterterrorism Committee, FBC. FBC sent a heavily armed operative went to the Caucasus base, but all contact was lost, and several of our investigators went missing. That's why we came to investigate. So what did you find? We were attacked by villagers in Samuba village north of Kazbek. During the conflict, we killed several crazy villagers. After conducting research, we found that these villagers were all infected by the virus. A brand new virus. Lin Huo said. Arabai said sharply, you killed someone in Samuba, and you dare to speak nonsense here? Guards. Catch them. Wait. The Minister of Defense immediately interrupted him, Lin Huo, right? Let's go on. We conducted research on the corpses and found that the death time of these corpses was a week ago. In other words, it was a group of corpses that attacked us. Lin Huo said, then we discovered the existence of this brand new virus. The virus only makes the infected person weak and stunned, and there are no side effects. But when the virus really works, after the target dies. A virus that only works on dead people? The Minister of Defense's voice darkened. That's right, not only people who have just died, but even skeletons that have been dead for many years will be resurrected by this virus. In Samuba village, there are a large number of living dead wandering around, and, crawling up from the cemetery skeleton. Lin Huo said. Skeleton or something, you know I don't want to hear fairy tales. Arabais was obviously a little scared. Unlike his strong figure, this guy seemed very timid. Is it a fairy tale? You will soon be able to see it with your own eyes. Because the virus is spreading to Kazbek, maybe it won't be long before the skeletons in the Kazbek cemetery will all stand up. Arabai's face suddenly turned pale with a slap. Thank you for the 1,000 starting coins rewarded by Star Sea Rangers. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 433. 427 Life and Death. The Minister of Defense of Georgia on the other end of the phone was silent for a while, and asked, then what does what you said have anything to do with our South Austrian Tier Autonomous Prefecture? Lin Huo sneered and said, what do you mean by yours? In fact, the Naneo X ladder has already left Georgia, and what is lacking now is that layer of paper that has not been pierced. You, Arabais roared angrily and was about to go into a fit, but looked at the phone again, and sat down slowly. We have been judging what the remnants of the umbrella company are planning in the Caucasus Mountains, so, based on their current active activities in Georgia instead of Russia, I have made such an assumption. Lin Huo crossed his fingers, supporting his chin, he said solemnly. If they use the T-virus and this new type of virus, let's call it the undead virus, they build up an invincible army and start arming them secretly. Then they collude with the high-level officials of the South Austria X-echelon, on the one hand use the undead virus to threaten your capital Tbilisi, and on the other hand, help South Austria to threaten your military town of Gori. Under the two-pronged offensive, even if Georgia can support it and not be defeated, it will definitely lose its intervention in South Austria. The power of the latter. Then, they can declare independence directly and openly, so, Lin Huo's voice was very slow, but every word was serious. What you said is just nonsense. It can't happen at all. The Minister of Defense said sharply, if you just waste my time with such baseless lies, then I will order you to be shot now. Lin Huo sighed softly, shook his head and said, this is not a lie, but a fact that is happening. What about the map? Show me. Minister of Defense, please open the map of your country too. As he spoke, he stood up and walked to Arabai's desk, unfolded the map of Georgia, and then pointed to the map and said, we conducted some investigations before we came, and found that the main cases of missing persons were in Ushgulai and Kazakhstan. 2 places in Zbek. These 2 places are the directions where the other party started spreading the virus. So look at the map. Linhuo drew a V on the map. Kazbek is in the northeast of Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, and there is a direct road to it. Ushgulai is in the northwest of Tbilisi, but you have to go to Ush for the hometown. The tourist route needs to go from Mscha, but what if political factors are not taken into account? To the south of Ushgulai is the South Austrian ladder, and if you go all the way, it is the most important military town in Georgia, Gori. Once Gori falls, the fate of Georgia is over. The Minister of Defense snorted coldly and said, "Humph. We have heavily guarded Gori, the 1st Brigade and the 2nd Brigade of the National Defense Forces guard Gori. How can the weak troops of Nanaosti threaten Gori? Get to the point as soon as possible. Go. You're wasting my time." Lin Huo continued to patiently said, "I have already understood the opponent's strategy. First, they spread the virus in Ushgulai and Kazbek at the same time, and spread all the way south. They infect civilians through T-virus and undead virus, and treat civilians as their own. Soldiers, plus skeletons resurrected from the cemetery, their army would soon overwhelm the Georgian defense forces in numbers. Then the spread of the virus in the direction of Kazbek will directly threaten Tbilisi, and Tbilisi has concentrated 30% of the population of Georgia. You must know that all the dead are their source of soldiers. The larger the population, the more dead, and the more dead, the bigger their army. In this case, you must mobilize troops from Gori to return to the defense. And at that time, the undead army they assembled in the Ushgulai area cooperated with the Nanaosti army to attack Gori. How sure do you think you are to hold it? Even if they can turn the dead into their soldiers, they are still unarmed civilians. Even if there is a skeleton that really climbs up from the ground, can it withstand the bombardment of the cannon?" The voice of the Minister of Defense began to increase, but it was obvious that hearing his sternness, he obviously realized that if the opponent adopts the strategy to threaten Tbilisi and Gori at the same time, the time for Georgia's subjugation is just around the corner. Lin Huo didn't mean to reassure him, but continued, "So there is another piece of news. We found out that Umbrella Company had an underground fund flow. It should be after they sold the last real estate and option investment. Received funds. And most of that money went into Ukraine. How much is it?" Arabais asked loudly as he stood up eagerly, with cold sweat starting to break out on his forehead. $2 billion, US dollars. Lin Huo's voice was very calm. Plop, Arabais sat down blankly, as if his soul had gone out of his body, with a dull expression. There was also a dead silence on the other end of the phone. After a long time, the Minister of Defense said hoarsely, "Are you sure? The only thing that is uncertain is how much of the $2 billion has been spent, and how many weapons have been purchased." Lin Huo said. "Do you know how much Georgia's military expenditure last year was?" The Minister of Defense said slowly, $15 million. So do you know what that $2 billion means to us? If the other party really attacks us, then just that's enough money to kill us. But, why would they do that? The difference between a company and a country, do you understand? No matter how rich a company is, it cannot have an army, no sovereignty, no land, and diplomacy. But if it can become a country, then these are not problems. Georgia itself has no such a high value, but if Georgia can be used as a chicken to lay eggs of a sovereign country, then I think the other party may even be willing to pay $20 billion. Lin Huo said slowly. Then we are bound to lose. Arabais said in horror. Our only chance is to crash their deployment before their plans are fully unfolded. Now that the virus has not spread to Kazbek, we still have a chance to limit their expansion. Then we have another several investigators are investigating in the direction of Ushgulai. It would be best if they can find their lair, Lin Huo said. Arabais was shocked suddenly, and clapped his hands and said, "That's right. We can directly bomb their lair. Just kill the source. The specific location of the lair is in Russia, go and blow it up." Lin Huo said lightly. "Do you have any plans?" the Secretary of Defense asked. "On the one hand, immediately evacuate the civilians in Kazbek and isolate them, paralyzing the offensive of one of the other sides. On the other hand, you must pay attention to the movements of the South Austrian X-ladder, and respond to any changes in them in advance. Also, strengthen the control. Investigations in northern border towns have confirmed that the virus has not spread elsewhere. Finally, closely track the movement of weapons imported from Ukraine. These weapons cannot be allowed to arm the army of the undead." Lin Huo said. "Wait a minute, I need to ask His Excellency the President." On the other end of the phone, the Minister of Defense was already in a cold sweat, and now he was facing the choice of life and death for the country. He picked up another phone on his desk and connected directly to the President with a dedicated line. "Thank you for the 1,000 starting coins rewarded by Nano Fighter. All Heavens Unlimited Base." Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 434. 428 Corruption. After the Minister of Defense had a conversation with the President, he said on the phone, "We will first send helicopters to investigate Kazbek and Ushagulai, and after confirming the truth of what you said, we will discuss how to act." Lin Huo became anxious immediately, stood up suddenly and said loudly, "There is still a discussion? Are you kidding? Although the undead virus and the T-virus cannot be transmitted through the air, these two viruses are still terrifyingly contagious. Every delay in a minute, more civilians will be infected. This matter is related to the fate of our entire country, and we must proceed with caution," the defense minister said. You," Lin Huo pointed at the phone and was about to start cursing, but was stopped by Rupier. "Okay, then we will stay here and will do our best to help you. In addition, we have a group of reinforcements on the way and need to obtain your entry and landing permit," Looper said. "Reinforcements? What kind of reinforcements can you have as a company?" The tone of the Minister of Defense became a little contemptuous. "Maybe you multinational companies are rich, but you can't afford wars between countries. Even Umbrella Corporation at that scale, there can only be about 1,000 mercenaries at most, so what is the use of your reinforcements?" Looper smiled and said, "The number is indeed not large, but these reinforcements are not afraid of virus erosion, and they are specially used to deal with Umbrella's T-virus, so they should be able to help. Regarding this aspect, a coordinator from our group will contact you individually." What she said was quite meaningful, and the Minister of Defense understood it immediately. "Then feel free, you can arrange this trivial matter as you like. But don't play tricks on me." The Minister of Defense dropped this sentence and hung up the communication. Looper stood up, gestured to Lin Huo secretly, then walked up to Arabais, and said softly, "Don't worry about those people above, now a great achievement is in front of you, let's work together, we as long as the data of Umbrella Corporation, everything else is your spoils." As she spoke, she took out a stack of banknotes from her pocket, put them on the table and gently pushed them over. "This stack is full of $100. Looking at the thick stack, it looks like there are tens of thousands of dollars." Sure enough, Arabai's eyes lit up, he gave a dry cough, looked around, and put the banknotes into his pocket calmly. At this time, his expression eased a lot. "As a soldier, it is my duty to defend the motherland and protect civilians from evil forces. I also understand your jealousy, but after all, we are an army. It has to be done together." Looper was also very generous. She took out 2 stacks of dollars and pushed them over, saying, "Of course I understand your difficulties, so please cooperate." Arabais laughed, and immediately called the adjutant over and said, "I have already reported to the Minister of Defense. The situation is very urgent. We will start to act immediately." These two are now appointed as our army's advisors. We must cooperate with them as much as possible. Action. First, send people into Kazbek to investigate, and evacuate civilians if necessary. Lin Huo said. Arabais fully agreed and immediately went to make arrangements. Lin Huo looked at his back very contemptuously, and sneered, "Do these people even care about the residents of their own country? The virus is already in sight, and they are still procrastinating about taking kickbacks?" Luper shook his head and said, "Since the disintegration of the former Soviet Union, Georgia's political situation has been unstable. Several factions in their country have fought against each other, and corruption is common. In addition to the South Austrian latter, the Abkhazia region and the Azar region are also in a semi-independent state. The former is supported by Russia, and the latter is supported by Turkey. So for them, their own power and interests are indeed more important than civilians." Lin Huo sighed. He understood that the reason why he was qualified to participate in this incident was entirely because of his status as an experimenter. There is no chance of talking to someone like Rupier, let alone learning about the situation in this country. So for such things, Luper did see much more thoroughly than he did. He had always wanted to convince the other party from the perspective of the safety of civilians and the safety of the country, but he didn't know that he could not compare with the stacks of banknotes Rupier handed over after he said so earnestly for a long time. What irony! Over there, Arabais was on the phone, his voice was loud, and he gestured to the soldiers next to him. Those soldiers immediately raised their guns and shot towards the sky, creating an atmosphere of a battlefield. Lin Huo could vaguely hear him angrily saying that he was attacked and needed more support, helicopters, tanks, and so on. After the phone call, he came over and said, "I've called for helicopter and tank reinforcements. Soon we'll have enough power to wipe out the remnants of the Umbrella Corporation." "Ha ha ha ha. Aren't you going to call in more reinforcements?" "We only have 1 battalion here, I'm afraid it's not enough," Lin Huo said. "Not at all. Enough is enough." Arabais waved his hands impatiently, probably because he was worried that the reinforcements would take away his credit and bribes. He beckoned to 2 officers and said, "Go into Kazbek to investigate first. If the situation is wrong, contact me immediately. I'll go with them. I know a lot about this virus. Rupier will stay here. Our group's reinforcements should be on the way," Lin Huo said. 50 soldiers wearing gas masks drove towards Kazbek in 3 trucks, and Lin Huo sat in the co-pilot position of the front vehicle. He was thinking all the way, if the necromancer on the other side planned to use the T-virus and necromancy to build an army, then now he has the source of soldiers and money, but what about the weapons? How will they send the weapons over? He was puzzled by this question. If the supply of weapons cannot be guaranteed, then the unarmed undead army is absolutely impossible to be the opponent of the modern army. However, Georgia and Ukraine are separated by the Black Sea on the sea and Russia on the land. It doesn't look like a state where large-scale weapons can be transported over. The truck entered the town while bumping, and it was only afternoon, but there were no pedestrians on the street, and it seemed extremely deserted. You must know that Kazbek can still attract some tourists, and the current situation is indeed very strange. Lin Huo thought of their helicopter pilot, picked up the phone to call, but couldn't get through, which made him feel even more bad. He turned his head and said to the driver, "Be careful, everyone don't get out of the car, let's go to the cemetery behind the church." Cold sweat could already be seen on the driver's forehead. He nodded, picked up the walkie-talkie and talked for a while, then drove towards the church. The weird atmosphere made everyone feel terrified. When the truck drove to the cemetery, almost everyone gasped when they saw the scene in front of them. Some soldiers even yelled out in fear. The entire cemetery was in a mess, almost all the graves were turned from the inside out, and the corpses inside were gone. Thank you for the 1,000 starting coins rewarded by Star Sea Rangers.